And there we have it. I am streaming live on my phone to Instagram. We placed the telephone very cautiously on my console and addressed the audience. Onyx, God bless her, who handles our social media, is bootlegging as well, guerrilla style, to my one Facebook blog page, which gets out to shy of 100,000 odd people. So hopefully some of you will still get to see it through Facebook. This is the public segment I'm talking about of the Lazarus Symposium. So friends, I am here in Zambia in sub-Saharan Africa, having arrived here a couple of days ago. And I'm going to give you a little outline of today's Lazarus Symposium. I am fiercely jet lagged right now. I don't mind confessing. So I'm so grateful that producer Christy ensured that we pre-recorded most of the segments, or in fact, all of the segments of this Lazarus Symposium this month. And next month, I think I'll be able to anchor the front end of the symposium, at least the first couple of hours. But for now, it's late night here in Zambia. And just to let you know, I'll be on the ground in Africa for about three and a half weeks, something like that, moving from Zambia to the Kingdom of Barotseland. On Tuesday, we head there. That's Western Province of Zambia. And doing our New Earth scouting, which many of you are aware of. Then we're heading up to Malawi and taking a boat to Lake Likoma, which is also another stronghold for the New Earth micronation group of satellites that we're seeding in Africa. And I'll take a boat to Lake Likoma and hopefully do some live broadcasting from there. When I say live broadcasting, I mean, I'm limited now to broadcasting to Facebook and then sending links through to Onyx, who can share them to the Facebook blog page. But my official Sasha Stone Facebook has been taken down. But I understand from Christy that we've got a pretty healthy YouTube outreach now, and I believe also on X. Is that correct, Christy? I've got more or less got that right. So I think we're getting out to more people than I thought we were when I made a forlorn, somewhat plaintive message this morning, sitting under a tree outside the hotel here, imagining that I'd lost contact with our entire universe through social media, and we're only going to be able to broadcast to our own community through the Lazarus platform. But it looks as though we're still able to use some guerrilla tactics. So we'll be doing the best we can in the coming weeks and see if we get back online. In any event, let me just say, after Malawi, Lake Likoma, we'll be heading to Botswana, and we'll be going through Zimbabwe. And I'll be heading back to Harare in Zimbabwe, where I did my schooling and spent many years of my misspent youth dodging bullets in the war for independence there when it was Rhodesia. And shortly after it became Zimbabwe, I was in South Africa for a couple of years, finishing education before being dispatched to Europe, my refugee years, for about 9 years as a stateless white African. Well, that was a long time ago. And for me, it's come full circle, this whole kind of African saga, revisiting the marrow in my bones and coursing through my blood, and understanding now as I am the journey of my own life, and how it's come full circle, and what it was that I was called to do in the Western world, in the Northern Hemisphere, for all these years. And I'm not talking about, rock and roll stuff in my 20s. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about really since 1999, 2000, 2001, when I set up a Humanitad foundation, began my my own brand of citizen diplomacy, running around meeting with world leaders and religious leaders and political leaders and cultural leaders, and trying to understand what the proverbial fuck was behind the mutant source code of our civilizational model, which is war and disease and poverty, entropy, the trial of separation, the stuff that then fueled my own inquiry in life, and many years with Humanitat Foundation launching initiatives and trying to hack away at that status quo in so many different ways for so many years with so many amazing humans leaning in and helping the work that I was doing over the years, thousands of good people, and that leading to the New Earth Project, which was birthed in 2013. So I kind of lay down my, I jokingly say my Jesuit mantle, but then of course that's going to be picked up by motherfuckers out there who love to accuse me of being a Vatican agent and hate on me. But what I mean by that is I used to do my work, my diplomacy work, and my orchestration of stuff. I used to do it very much behind the curtain, and I had a very unique fear of public speaking. It was the last possible thing I was ever going to do with my life, was to do public speaking. And then one fine day, a beloved friend of mine, Chris Cleverly, who some of you will know is a justice now, our main justice on the International Tribunal for Natural Justice. I'd known him for a very long time. But he called me, this must have been, oh God, I don't know, 15 years ago, something like that, 13, 14 years ago. He called me up one day because he was involved with Humanitat Foundation, and then we used to dream together about how we could redeem Africa. He's a largely black, and I'm mostly white, to the best of my cognizance. But we used to dream about Mother Africa and about the unified dream that we had about remedy, bringing remedy to Africa in the course of our lives. Me, because I'm a third generation white African, but also part of a kind of long-standing imperialist movement that sacked the African continent. And, that's connected to, of course, the Vatican and the crimes of the imperial crowns of Europe and the war powers that have rendered the dark continent of Africa and most of the rest of the world, Central and Southeast Asia and Central South America, the developing nations of the world have been laid to waste in the main, in the last few hundred years, courtesy of the Vatican complex and its proxies, which were the crowns of Europe, which then morphed into the war powers that we know today as Washington and the NATO forces, and the kind of globalist agenda, which is essentially now like some fucking behemoth lurched onto land and become the beast of the land, in accordance with the biblical prophecies. And here we are in the end of the year 2025, and we're about to see a seismic shift, of course, in the world. It's happening at every level, geopolitically and socio-economically, and in the lives of every single one of us. We're seeing that same tailspin of chaos, of end of days stuff, But back to my story, Chris Cleverly, my beloved friend, called me up one day and said to me, "Oh, Sasha, I've been invited to do the Lighthouse lecture." It's a very famous lecture at that time, which was held, I think, once a month or something in the city of London at the Lighthouse Theatre. And it was a very prestigious thing. I think Richard Branson had done the month before him, and before very famous and successful people were generally invited to give the Lighthouse lecture once a month. And, 200 or 300 CEOs and chairmen and powerful execs of leading companies and institutions would gather at the Lighthouse Theatre. And it was that kind of Shakespearean type of bowl theatre, amphitheatre style, very small, very cozy, very powerful. And he said, "I want you to attend this with me. And because he was involved with Humanitad. He was, I think, technically a trustee of Humanitad. And I said, sure, I'll come and support you if you're giving the Lighthouse lecture, Chris. That's a fantastic idea. I'll come and sit in the front row and, lend some support. And I turned up at the theater. It's a great story, incidentally. And he said to me, when I got there, I saw him backstage, and he said, oh, please sit close to the stage, and I just want to, at some point, acknowledge you, Sasha, as the founder of Humanitad. And because I'm going to speak about some of the stuff I'm going to talk about, will touch on the work we do together with Humanitad Foundation. So I said, well, that's fine. That's okay. I'll happily, stand up, take a bow or whatever. And son of a bitch, let me tell you what happened. And Chris, if you're watching this, you might remember this. This is how I entered into the public domain. Because I turned up at the theater, sat at the front row near the stage, or the podium where he was. He gets up onto the podium. The place is absolutely filled. The theater is filled. The lights go down. It's all blacked out. And he stands up and he speaks for a few minutes. And then he mentions Humanitad, and then he mentions me. And he says, and the founder of Humanitad is Sasha Stone is here, and applause, applause, applause. Sasha, stand up. And I stood up and nervously kind of acknowledged the acknowledgement. And he beckoned me to come up to the podium. I'm like, fuck off. No way am I coming up onto that podium. Nonetheless, he insisted. And what do you do in a situation like that? So I did. I got up onto the podium, and he handed me the microphone. And the next thing, I turned around and he disappeared. He'd gone. And I was standing on the stage holding a microphone in the Lighthouse Theater on my own, with a spotlight on me and 200 or 300 heavyweights looking at me. My universe bottomed out at that point. I don't know if you've ever done that before, anyone giving you a keynote speech at a wedding or a funeral or something, but it's terrifying stuff. And in any event, that was the full realization of my greatest fear in life, which was to be exposed in the public and have eyeballs on me. Now, it's one thing having a guitar and being on a stage in a music setting. You can perform. It's a performance. It's a different thing. But when you're having to speak, public speak, and unscripted as well, my universe bottomed out. And I confess, I fled the stage. I couldn't say a single word. I put the microphone down on the, whatever you call it, the lectern, and I fled off the stage. And I went to try and find the exit, and it was all blacked out. It was just the one spotlight on the stage. And I went round the back of the seating, this kind of amphitheater bowl seating, along the big black curtains to try and find the exit. And I went all the way around, and I came back to the other side of the stage. I couldn't find the exit, and the spotlight was back on me. And in that moment, I saw the divine comedy and the providence. And I picked up the microphone because I just thought, well, fuck it. I'm here. And I remember sitting down on the stage with the microphone. I just started to talk. I started to talk about the genesis of Humanitad and the work that I was doing, and ended up getting a standing ovation. I think I must have spoken for an hour and 20 minutes. So I think got a standing ovation. And that was how I first got yanked by the universe, as people say nowadays, got yanked into my next octave of expression in life. And at that point, after that, I was never afraid. And then in 2012, I was invited to do the Global Breakthrough Energy Movement Congress in The Hague in Holland, with Dr. David Martin, Michael Tellinger, I think Foster Gamble, Catherine, an incredible economist who was just on Tucker Carlson. Anyway, a whole bunch of great and good people. And I chaired that Congress in 2012, really cut my teeth in the public speaking thing. And the following year, 2013, I began my broadcasting, so to speak, and doing shows and slowly getting used to that whole world of just talking to a camera and trying to be as authentic and anchored in the real. 2013, I launched the New Earth Project, and and then 2015 launched the International Tribunal for Natural Justice at Westminster in London, and in 2018 we did the seatings in Westminster for the child trafficking and human trafficking and child sex abuse hearings and financial crimes hearings, and then 2019 the hearings in Indonesia in the weaponization of the biosphere, and then of course COVID hit 2020, and we did the COVID hearings, and then we've just in the last couple of weeks been taking the first 2 testimonies for the final Judicial Commission of Inquiry that the ITNJ is likely to do, and this is the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into the doctrine of discovery. And it's taken us a couple of years to work up to these hearings, and it's staggering stuff. And we've begun to take the testimonies. I think we'll start to release them to the public next month before Christmas. It's beautiful stuff. It's full circle. It's redemption. It's how we begin to, and I'm talking about we, the common folk, you and I, how do we create remedy in this world? How do we take full accountability for the universe that we're met with, for the status quo, and how do we alchemize it into a higher outcome, into the highest outcome? How do we anchor patterns of perfection in this world and begin to manifest, embody, and enact the kingdom of heaven on earth? That is what the Lazarus Symposium is all about, and that's why coming out of COVIDiocy in 2020 into 2021, we launched Lazarus Symposium, a monthly symposium, which we've maintained for the last 5 years. Desperately proud of it, have to say. It's not a huge community, but it's a considerable community. It's many thousands of folk. And you are my universe. You are my sounding board. And the hundreds of incredible thought leaders and scientists and artists and pioneers in consciousness who have come forward on the many, many hundreds of segments and shows that we've done, build up that chorus of inquiry. And I think that we represent the very best of humanity, of what it is to be a human in a Saturnian, satanic, luciferic, fucked up age, which is thousands of years of really the fallen light of Atlantis that we're addressing in the now, in the living present, and using that diabolical backdrop as the contrast against which we now collectively choose to dream our ascension. So everything is perfect always and always, and the devil always serves God's design. And I think we just have to see that we've arrived at this axiomatic point where it is on you and I to rise like Lazarus from the dead, and again manifest the kingdom of heaven on earth. And that to me is really my unilateral focus with the new earth, with the new earth horizon, with the pioneering work that we're doing now in Africa, establishing and seeding these micronation satellite jurisdictions, which will slowly, steadily be threading together. We're building an economy forward, and we'll be making some, I believe we'll be in a position to make some bold pronouncements, certainly before the end of the first quarter of 2026, by the grace of the living God, as I always put it, because I don't want to speak ahead of myself, but just an acknowledgement and a thank you to the community of the Lazarus Initiative, thousands of you out there who make this feasible and relevant. Otherwise, it would be myself and producer Christy and our small team would be barking into an abyss, which would be a terribly sad state of affairs. But in any event, I will speak more at the next month's symposium about what it is that we're doing on the ground in Africa here, and I should be able to also accompany it with maybe, Christy, maybe we do an opening segment on what it is that we're doing in Africa, and I can do a kind of, I guess, a 45-minute, maybe 1 hour piece at the front and show some of the film and drone footage, what I'll be taking in the course of the next 3 weeks on the ground here in Africa. In any event, I've been warbling on for a little bit too long. I was going to give it 15 minutes. I see it's 23 minutes past the hour. Let me just say that in light of the fact that I've been taken down off Facebook, there is a link to my Instagram, and the QR code on Instagram is below this posting that you're watching right now. So just go to the previous posting and you should see one QR code will take you to sashastone.com, and that's where you can sign up for my Pulse report, which me and the team put together once a month, and we do a live broadcast and give an update on all the various activities that we're engaged with around the world. And you can also go to the other QR code that you'll see there in the post alongside that, which is the QR code that'll take you straight to the Lazarus platform. And there you go. If you're watching the live show now, you can see it on the screen. But there you have it. Go to that, use your telephone, enter the kingdom of the devil with that QR code, and sign up there, if you will, and if you wish to participate in our monthly symposium. Every month we do this opening segment, is a freebie, and then members only. We close the shop, and only members get to watch the next 4 or 5 hours of the full symposium. Just to let you know that today we're starting with the bonus segment is Undreaming Wetiko, from possession to liberation, and this is with Paul Levy. And those of you who know who this man is will know that his work is of profound importance. And Robert Forte, who is the kind of, I guess, Timothy Leary of today. Certainly he knew Timothy and all of those great characters back in the day, but very lucky through my beloved friend Carolyn in Bali to be introduced recently to Robert Forte. And Robert, Christy and I brought Robert Forte and Paul Levy together, and it was a mutual admiration club there with these two guys, heavyweights coming together with dear friend Anna Naturalista, who is a true New Earth mama in chief, actually, because Anna's been connected to the New Earth source coding and the metric of our pioneering work for many, many long years, and she's a beloved friend. And also Olivia Steele, who is an art director from Burning Man, a wonderful, wonderful woman, and she joined the panel. So enjoy that first bonus segment coming up, Undreaming Wetiko. What is that about? It is really about how we do navigate ourselves now away from the kingdom of the devil as it relates to the inverse Kundalini, the inverse life force, and demonic demiurge energetics that I describe in the same way that Anna Naturalista describes it, as conjuring the chemical demon. So whether we're talking about synthetic molecules in pharmaceutical products, or in alcoholism, or in any of the more mundane drug addictions, the sheer fact of the matter is that younger generations today are almost entirely subsumed in certain parts of the world into this drug culture. Now, you call it what the fuck you like, call it medicine if you want to. It takes a very, very rare individual to navigate the medicine aspect alone. Unfortunately, most people who have been involved in substance abuse and addiction get pulled into that demonic cloud, and it does create dysregulation and dispossession, and it breaches relationships and families and communities, and individuals are shredded and torn apart as a result of it. It's something we all experience in our lives variously, but it's becoming serious because certainly in the Western world, it's become endemic, and it is a pandemic, which is endemic in the Western world. And this is the conjuring of the chemical demon that's happening under the aegis of just having a good time. No, it's not. It's synthetic molecular interventionism, and it's very dangerous stuff. It's how we begin to surrender and abnegate our divine sovereignty whilst imagining that we are divine and are sovereign when we're not. We're actually willfully eroding our divine mantle if we continue along that path at the collective level. We have to unplug from synthetic molecules. I've been warning about this for a long time. And this year, 2025, is the line in the fucking sand, trust me. People moving into 2026, you're either on this side of the line or you're on that side of the line. And if you're still on that side of the line, you are screwed. You will be pulled into the devil's tailspin, and you will likely be irretrievable from it. And that is a stark warning from a very, very sober shock poet here. And I hope this message reaches people. So a very important panel coming up with some important voices. Do watch it. The next member segment, we go into Thoth, Dragon Currents, and the Alchemy of Consciousness with Dalia, Ali, and Dan Winter. Remarkable stuff, and well worth watching that incredible conversation. Then we go into the Great Cosmic Turning, and this is a Regenesis retreat extract with my beloved astrologist Rick Levine. Now, this is we did this conversation quite a while back, but everything he said is so prescient, and this is something which is really for the cosmic archives. Then we're having Awakening the Hopi Vision. This is the fourth segment of today's Lazarus Symposium. Again, an extract taken from the Tanasi proclamation week that we did in New Earth, Tanasi, the project that we've turned the key on in the heart of Middle America earlier this year, with Hopi Messenger Bertram, who was there to preside on the, I guess we'd call it a judicial bench of the proclamation event that we did as we reclaimed the New Earth Tanasi land from the war powers. For those of you, hundreds of you who flew in from around the world to that landmark event, it was truly life-changing. And Hopi Bertram, one of the greatest messengers, in my view, the greatest messenger of the Hopi, joined us for that week. A beloved soul, a powerful, powerful man. And he brought the Hopi medicine to us, and watch that segment. The fifth segment today, and the last one, is exposing the Frankist plot. Who built Epstein? With none other than Leo Zagami. And that, friends, is Symposium number 53. And I think Christy wants to touch on a couple of other items here. So Christy, we can share, because I might want to comment. So let me bring you in here. Boom. How do we do this, Christy? Add to stage. There we go. So by all means, Christy, I'm going to turn my camera around here so folks on Instagram can see you, but crack on.
Well, yeah, sorry to inundate everybody with all the QR codes, but that is the best way to do it when you're not really sure. You don't want to write down the wrong link or anything like that. So I've also put links in the comments for people as well. But yeah, we just want to make sure people get your correct Instagram and follow you there, since we're having issues with the Facebook. And also, this is the new, excuse me, Lazarus Initiative Instagram that we're really going to start using. So go ahead and share and follow us there. And I think the last thing I just needed to bring up was the Black Friday on our favorite root brands. We've always loved them. And so when we found out that they had a 20% off, we wanted to share. There is a 5D code. So you just need to register. Make sure when you click the link that you register so that they know that you're coming in through our link, and see what they have. I think today's the last day for that.
Okay, is that it?
That's it.
Good stuff. All right, I'll turn my camera around and bid adieu to the audience. Again, thank you so very much, all of you out there who continue to look in on the Lazarus Initiative, the Lazarus Symposium. Please spread the word. I'm going to try my hardest to grow the Lazarus community now, so I'm going to be on the hustle to get people to sign up to it. And the reason is because of this continued deplatforming of me, and more egregiously than that, these insidious fake profiles that are popping up 2 to 3 a day, in some cases. It's terrifying. Now, we know this is a military intelligence operation. We've named these motherfuckers. They issue from the British. They're a fringe element in the British, coming from Britain. I might even do you know what, Christy, I think, how about next Lazarus Symposium, we do an expose on this particular unit. I'm not afraid of them. They've sent nasty threats to me in the past, really nasty stuff. I mean, nasty stuff. And even naming themselves with their ranks and telling me to back down, shut the fuck up, and park myself quietly to the side. It's not happened. And since last year, the deep fake videos on me coming out and subverting the work I'm doing every single day, I'm met with dozens of messages from people coming through different platforms, whether it's emails or coming through the contact points at Lazarus or New Earth Horizon or the ITNJ or the World Hereditary Council. People are trying to contact and say, hey, is this you? Is this you? Because I've been hit up and I paid money for something. People are paying subscriptions to platforms that don't exist. You know, it's serious stuff. So in that sense, friends, I'm being set up for fraud. Do you get how this works? People are sending substantial amounts of money. People are having relationships with Sasha Stone. Emphasis women are being hit on and being inveigled into paying for my airline tickets. You know, apparently they're having long-standing relationships with these fake Sasha Stones who are reaching out to them on WhatsApp as well as through their social media contacts, and are then building relations with them and then inviting them to participate in buying gold and silver and all sorts of crap. I don't do that shit. You know, I'm not involved in any of that stuff. So net is this: I do not solicit for anything unless I do solicit, and when I do solicit, trust me, you'll know it's me. But it's not me out there. These are fake pages. They are legion. We have no means of closing them down. Every time I report them, for some strange reason, the jackheads in Silicon Valley seem to think that the fake profiles have the legitimacy and I don't. So that's the reason why I'm going to be prosecuting for people to come onto our platform and really pushing that out there. So if you can sign up.
Yeah, we had a respite for a while. I was just going to say we had a respite, but now it's almost like we're back in COVID times, and I don't see other influencers having the same type of issues. It just seems to be focused on Facebook right now, and that was kind of our safe space, interestingly, for a little bit. And now it's Facebook is just totally turned on us. So Instagram.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you, Christy, and thank you to the audience. And I'm now going to collapse. It is 9:30 p.m. here, but for me, I'm long since gone. So I'm bidding you adieu, sending you much love, and look forward to seeing you next month. Bye now.
Okay, let's remove.
Lazarus, undreaming Wetiko, a journey from possession to liberation. And I can tell you that we've exceeded ourselves and have such an expert panel today to discourse on this subject, which in my unsolicited view is arguably one of the most important subjects on Earth that are not popularly discussed. and that need to be brought into the mainstream dialogue. And that is connected to Ahriman, that is connected to the egregore, it's connected to the conjuring of the chemical demon, as my friend Anna Naturalista and one of our panelists speaks to this subject in those terms. There is a shadow that has traveled beside us since the dawn of self-reflection, an invisible contagion woven through empire, economy, and ego. The Algonquin called it Wetiko, the cannibal spirit, the eater of life force, the mind virus that convinces its host that separation is survival. Wetiko is the ancient infection of forgetting, the whisper that says consume rather than commune, control rather than create. It is the unseen algorithm feeding on fear and appetite, turning the living world into a harvest of data and the human soul into a battery. So in this show, we're standing essentially at the frontier of an even subtler possession, which is the age of conjuring that chemical demon. The triumph of the synthetic over the organic, the lab-made mimicry of what was once living spirit. And we witness medicines replaced by molecules without memory, rites replaced by branded protocols, and revelation reduced to dosage. Wetiko wears the mask of the chemist, promising transcendence while severing us from the living web. And this is the war between the living and the dead, be sure of that, between the ensouled and the simulated, the breath of Gaia and the sterile hum of circuitry. It defines whether we spiral toward dissolution or ascend toward immanence and divinity. To undream Wetiko is to reclaim the organic geometry of life itself, the golden ratio, so to speak, in our very bones, the pulse of compassion in the heart and the coherence of truth that cannot be manufactured. And so we gather here, 4 luminous minds joining me who have dared to look into the abyss without flinching. Paul Levy, whose work reveals Wetiko as both diagnosis and medicine. Anna Naturalista, who traces its archetypal lineage through Gnostic and indigenous cosmologies. Robert Forte, iconic historian of the psychedelic movement and custodian of spiritual integrity. And Olivia Steele, a light artist and seer whose luminous language restores sovereignty through art. And together we're going to explore how this psychic contagion infiltrates our world and how the distinction between the synthetic and the organic marks humanity's path, either back to divinity or deeper into the dream of dissolution. With that, let me bring my friends into the studio. Dr. Paul Levy, very happy to receive you today in Lazarus.
Yeah, I'm just so happy to be here with you. Thank you so much. And I just appreciate, all the words you just said. I was like, wow, you're really capturing what my work is about.
Thank you. Well, we've learned from the master what to say. So thank you for your attendant genius on the subject. I'd like to also bring in Anna Naturalista, who curiously enough is sitting in a salon not too far from me down the corridor here. And shout out to my beloved Sue Wong for lending me one of her fabulous mansions for my stay in Los Angeles, which has lasted now for about 3 weeks. Anna, good to see you. You'll need to unmute your microphone, but happy to receive you here and look forward to having a coffee with you after the show. We've finished the production here because we just got a bump at the door, went straight into the studio, haven't even given you a hug, but thanks for joining us on Lazarus today.
My absolute pleasure, and it's an absolute honor to discuss this very important topic with all of you today, and I am so grateful to dive into it with everyone here. So thank you for holding space for us. And thank you, Paul, for driving the work and leading the way. I'm very honored to be guided by your work. Thank you.
Indeed, indeed. I'd like to also introduce Robert Forte. Robert made acquaintance with you only a matter of days ago through a mutual but much beloved, long-standing friend. So happy to meet you, and thank you for joining us at short notice.
Well, it's my pleasure, Sasha, and I just want to echo Paul's words. I'm really taken by your introduction because as I was thinking today what I might add to this, and was his work that introduced me to that concept some years ago. And my journey through and with psychedelic drugs, you kind of summarized that so brilliantly. So I'm very happy to be here with all of you. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. And finally, friends, let me introduce Olivia Steele, who is in the green room having some difficulties straightening out the camera. What the hell? Let's embarrass her. Bring her straight in. Olivia, good to see you.
I know. Sorry, it's super choppy on my end.
No, you look great. You look great, and that's a good angle. Good to meet you. And thank you for joining us. In defining Wetiko and in seeking to establish the foundation, what is it? Where does it live in the psyche and in the world? My first question would go to you naturally, Paul. You've called Wetiko malignant egophrenia, a dreaming disease that convinces us we're separate. So how did you first recognize it as a living pattern rather than an abstract idea?
Yeah, well, I went through this experience of encountering Wetiko. This was, 45 years ago. And yeah, I'm not going to go into this story, but it had to do with my family of origin. And my father was cast in the role of being so taken over by his unconscious that, he unwittingly became an instrument for this higher dimensional psychic, disease of the soul to come through him. And it destroyed my entire family. It almost killed me. It almost drove me crazy. But I was fortunate enough to recognize that, oh, wait a second, this is a revelation. Something is being shown to me. And, so it's not just like I'm coming from the point of view of a scholar or intellectual or an idea. No, at a certain point, I began to realize, wait a second, this is what every spiritual tradition throughout history has been pointing at, that exists in the non-local field, and including our own psyche. And we all can be, we all can fall into our unconscious and unwittingly offer ourselves to be a conduit for this, whatever we call it, the indigenous, the name, they called it Wetiko, but in the apocryphal text, they called it the counterfeiting spirit. Mm. It puts us on, it impersonates us. And if we're not awake in that moment to our nature, we just assume it's fake identity as a separate self. And as soon as we think of ourselves as being separate, being a dream, the dream will offer us all the evidence we need each and every moment to confirm our, fabricated identity of existing as a separate self. And the more we identify in that way, the more the dream just reflects it back. It's a feedback loop, in which basically we've entranced ourselves via our own creative genius. And that's the tragedy of it. But encoded in that process is the solution, is the medicine.
Indeed. So if awareness is itself becomes the cure, what distinguishes genuine recognition from spiritual bypass, to use that overused term?
Yeah. No, and I'm glad you're bringing up the spiritual bypass, because that's endemic in our spiritual world these days, in the New Age world. And the idea of having it be real, authentic seeing of Wetiko, because Wetiko, it works through the blind spots of our unconscious. So it's a form of psychic blindness. And that means that the way to heal it is to see it, but you can only see it in the present moment as it's arising in your mind with our complicity. We're actually unwittingly participating in its conjuration. Mm-hmm. So it's not something out there objective. It's not independent, so that's what is really is the test for, making the differentiation between the spiritual bypass, which could be all these theories and ideas and beliefs, compared to this living experience of being in the moment and really having the experiential insight and seeing, I'm actually colluding with this seeming like evil seeming entity.
Yeah. Anna, you connect Wetiko to the Gnostic demiurge and the Kabbalistic Klipot. Do these archetypes describe the same shadow under different names?
That's exactly right. No matter what religion or what ancient culture that I looked into and that we study, that there is a name, there is a term, and the Buddhists, I believe, Paul, you can tell me if it's correct or not, called it the dark rider and the secret ghost, or, there are all of these different terms and names for it. And the furthest back that I found the initial switch, the initial flip of the consciousness in a community of a social ceremonial practice that was originally based on the act of service and the act of honoring nature, as all of, again, the ancient civilizations of all time practiced the natural traditions of the eclipses and solstices, and worked with the natural rhythms of an all-loving creator God, until something switched in the society of leadership, and the control mechanism came in of this egoic fear of losing control, in which it went from the service of goods, of fruits to the altar, to a sacrificial, a murdering of someone, of a person, of an animal, of being creating some kind of a fear controlling God being, instead of one that was loving. And it immediately shifted the social culture from one that was creative to one that was being controlled by fear and by this demonic entity. If you do this bad thing, we're going to get you. And you see what happened to that guy. And it was used as part of this reframing of how to control an entire society, an entire culture, but simply by switching out that natural ability of being in alignment with nature's principles and being in an all-loving creatorship with the universe, versus what the Wetiko does in control and minimize and create this fear factor that is exactly what the oldest flip of that energy that I found in ancient societies was. Then if you fast forward it to even the gladiator times. I mean, there was so much in the Renaissance period of the Wetiko presence that I felt that was miswritten and represented, that Paul has brought so much light to. And so in my studies, I've been able to weave and track the timeline of this progression of this hungry shadow spirit that is now embedded in modern media, in pharmaceuticals, and many other things. Yet the ancient roots go as far back as we could possibly find.
Very good. And how does acknowledging it as an archetype, Wetiko as an archetype, rather than as an enemy, change our ability to heal it?
Well, this goes into the belief of innocence. If you reveal it to heal it is one of the things that I say, whether you are healing your physical body or the Wetiko itself, is that you must see it for what it is. The awareness of it itself disempowers it. Once you know it's there, once you know what you're dealing with, then you can shift your perspective and put yourself back in the leadership of what your script is and what you're choosing to give your energy to, and really be able to be in that management and more of the back in your creator spirit and in your driver's seat, rather than being imposed and being controlled by this subconscious entity that is a parasite of the unconscious collective.
Very good. And Robert, if I can turn to you, does Wetiko infect science itself, I guess, in underscoring the belief that matter is master of spirit?
Wow. First let me say that this is my first experience with all of you guys, and I'm just so excited about the resonance and the language that I've used and have been using in my studies. May be a little bit different, but this is a path that I've been on. I want to just tell a little story and answer your question, that I've been on since I was 10 years old, when I was growing up in a little town outside of New York City, Woodcliff Lake, because it was full of woods and lakes and a beautiful remote suburb. And I used to play at this stream, and I had a spontaneous mystical experience there, where it was astonishing. Just I was sitting by the stream, and the stream felt like it was my blood, and the wind that rustled through the trees was my breath. The ground that I was sitting on was my body. I was so astonished by this momentary experience of oneness that it changed my life. And just a short time after that, the stream, something happened to the stream. The stream was instantly polluted by construction that had happened upstream. Mercedes-Benz was beginning to build their Western Hemisphere headquarters and their office buildings. And it changed the sewerage or rerouted something. I went down to the stream, and the fish and the frogs were dead. They were washed up on the shore. And I was horrified by this. I'm 10 or 11 years old. And I told my parents, and we looked into it and found out that it was because the town had voted on this, that it was okay for Mercedes-Benz to build their headquarters there because it was going to lower the taxes in our town. And I'm a little kid, and I'm thinking, what the fuck? What is this strange sickness that some taxes, government, corporations, that somehow justify the killing of our stream? And nobody seemed to care. Well, very few of us that were played in nature all the time. This disconnect from nature and this love of money, I think, is really, as I gather what you're talking about with Wetiko, that's really the kind of the basis of this, the disconnection from nature and the substitution of a false spirituality, false, and eventually that I spent the rest of my life trying to figure out ways that people could regain this connection that I had naturally, and that eventually took me to the psychedelic substances.
Wonderful, thank you. Very, very pointed story. And of course, yeah, you've just taken this back to the source code, which is the trial of separation. And the first moment of cogitating that as a youngster is the greatest primal wound of all. So yeah, beautiful story. How can scholarship and reason serve revelation rather than suppress it?
Well, that's a tricky one. One of my professors at the University of Chicago, famous philosopher Paul Ricoeur, had a saying in one of his books, Manifestation and Proclamation, and his phrase was, "The seeing founds the saying, and not vice versa." And so that one of my other teachers, the great historian of religion, Mircea Eliade, was also tried to put this forward in the academy, that scholars of religion needed to base their scholarship and their inquiry on the religious experience that has been, kind of absent from the Western intellectual tradition for a very long time. That we lack this experiential basis, and how do we recover it? That's a very important part of this.
Indeed. Okay. Unfortunately, Olivia's jumped in and out of the studio multiple times. She must be having difficulties with her connection. Nonetheless, let's move on. In manifestations in the modern world, if we can look through that lens here, identifying Wetiko in our contemporary systems, political, media, in respect to spirituality and technology. Paul, across history, Wetiko has worn many masks. So where do you see its most potent expression today, speaking in terms of government, finance, digital media, medicine, so on and so forth?
Yeah, well, I would say the entire body politic is the living revelation of Wetiko. It's so obvious. It's in our face. It's in front of our eyes and behind our eyes. It's all over. It's non-local. There's nowhere where it's not. And, it just brings up this incredible dream I had 2 weeks ago, where in the dream, I was in a house and somebody had pushed a button and all this poison gas was coming into the house. So I run out and I see all these sprinklers all over the planet, and it's going to, the horizon in every direction, covering the earth. And the poison gas is coming out all over the place. And I realized, oh my God, it's everywhere. And at that moment, I became lucid, and I began having a lucid dream. And I realized, instead of, I need to just go into like rainbows and unicorns and cotton candy land, no, that my task as a lucid dreamer was, how do I transmute that poison into realization? And then when I woke up, I quickly realized that wasn't just a personal dream. That's the dream of our species, And so the point is when so many people are just overwhelmed by the darkness that's happening in our world, they split, they go numb, they, act out their addictions or whatever. But if you have the inner strength to not just dissociate and to have the recognition that it's a revelation, it can activate your creative spirit, because our spirit, by its very nature, what is our true nature? Our true nature is creative. And when you have the realization of your nature, you embody and express yourself creatively. And what Wetiko does, it taps into your unexpressed creativity and it turns it against you to serve its nefarious agenda. What that's saying is that when we have open eyes and see how this malevolent spirit is playing out, and you are able to stay present with what it's touching in you, that can be the catalyst for attaining lucidity and unlocking your creative spirit. And that's the solution. As more and more of us do that, and particularly when we connect with other people who are doing that, we begin to realize, oh, this is a collectively shared dream. And this dream is manifesting the way it is to reflect back our own unconscious blind spot. And when we begin to recognize that, all of a sudden we become empowered and take away the power that this seeming entity has over us.
Beautiful. And does the proliferation of AI, in your view, represent consciousness evolving, or would that more likely represent Wetiko self-replicating, so to speak?
Right. Well, the thing with Wetiko and with AI, it's a quantum phenomenon. And what I mean by that is just like light, well, encoded in light, is it a wave or a particle? It depends how you dream it, how it's observed. The same thing with Wetiko. It's going to destroy us, or it can help us to wake up if we recognize that what it's revealing to us. Same thing with AI. AI can be incredibly beneficial for humanity, but if it gets in the hands of people who aren't fully individuated and aren't coming from an open heart and haven't cultivated awareness, then it's gonna, be an expression of power over others instead of power with others. And it's exactly what you said, Sasha, in your introduction. Then it's like, instead of just the natural world, it becomes a total simulation. Because remember, Wetiko, it's a master, it's the counterfeiting spirit.
Yeah.
And then, if we're not awake in that moment and we've invested in that reality and we've identified ourselves as the separate self, then we're a goner. And then we're actually participating in our own victimization and we're creating our own nightmare. No one else is doing that to us.
Bravo.
We are doing that.
Bravo. Whilst we have Olivia back, I'm going to bring you in. Your work, Olivia, transforms words and light into, alchemical acts. How does art expose or exorcise Wetiko? Is really my essential question to you as the perennial art director and somebody who's been very connected to the that big aggregate of this kind of fuckery, the Burning Man scenario. Love or hate it, and there's a lot to love about it. And there's also a lot to be very, very cautious of. And that's really where how your voice reached me. But yeah, speak to this.
Well, first of all, I think words are spells, and words are so powerful. And my work, obviously, it uses words and light in combination to bring certain truths to light and to bring awareness. And that's what a lot of these signs, these road signs and my neons are about, is about bringing awareness. And they are also my tools for making it make sense. And what I experienced at Burning Man last year, a quick recap of that was a psychic attack. And in my 15 years of going to Burning Man and working and doing every level of everything you can imagine, I never experienced such a distortion and such a debilitating experience where I feel like, my energetic system got hacked, and it paralyzed me to a point where I couldn't my sovereignty was definitely very affected, and I couldn't communicate, and everything was just kind of falling apart. And that's typical for Burning Man, that like things don't go as planned, but this was another level of everything that I was connected to was falling apart. A tire fell off of my art car, like technology, all the technology and my machines and certain things were just like not working. This was beyond a level of normalcy. And from a physical sense, my whole, like, everything I knew as normal in terms of operating had been affected, and took me a really long time to recover. But how does art play a role in that? I mean, I think I was definitely like targeted because I have so much light, and because I bring a lot of light and a lot of love and just a lot to the playa. And Burning Man is one of the most juicy containers from which to extract, or let's say energy harvest, like to harvest energy from. So, you know, you don't steal from the poor, you steal from the rich, you steal from the souls that have the most juice and the most light. And I think I was definitely targeted, along with a lot of artists experienced similar, like something was off. It was beyond a normal, it was beyond the normal kafuckery that you can expect at Burning Man. And it was in many ways a big initiation for me. Brought a lot of awareness to the responsibility you have for your own sovereignty, for your own hygiene, your own energetic hygiene. And now that we are in 5D, the veil is so much thinner. We are not as protected, or we don't have this. We're not kind of cloaked in the delusion. Like things are more to the service, let's say, and we need to be aware of that. And I think it's something that's not really talked about. It's not really aware. People are not really aware of this, and so I think it's really important to bring it to the masses and bring awareness. Which thank you so much for doing. But it needs to be more of a dialogue, so people are aware of the dangers.
I mean, I know there's a lot of resistance. You know, I move in similar circles to you. We have a lot of intersect, in fact.
Mm-hmm.
And I am the rarest bird that I know only in one respect in this world, and that is that I've never chewed a magic mushroom or puffed marijuana, not once. So I have less than zero experience in anything whatsoever. Having said that, Anita Pallenberg, the woman who wrote the book on surviving being a junkie, you know, former wife to Keith Richards, was my closest friend until her death a few years ago. And for many years, along with Anita Pallenberg, I watched and walked her through cold Turkey and used to stay with her in Chelsea and, you know, look after her and make the tea and keep her warm. You know, I've been very close to that world, and I've seen it up close and personal. Heroin, the very worst in my view, when you get into really some of these really nasty distortion chemical. You know, it seems to me that the molecule, the synthetic molecule, is a very unique catalyst for anchoring to the kingdom of the devil. And that's a very circumspect, very sober, dry perspective. And I love psychedelics, incidentally. I've studied them. I love everything to do with it, mycelium and all the rest of it. But when we get into the synthetic molecules, some of these more egregious ones, that to me seems to be the trigger point, the catalyst for really invoking and unleashing this, to use Paul's expression, malevolent force comes in through that conduit, in my view, from what I've seen. So there's a huge distinction. And just wondering, you said you did everything on the playa to the max as an artist, as a creative, presumably as a participant. And I'm just assuming that with this kind of radical, kind of excessive, orgiastic kind of connection to 5-MeO and ketamine and all the rest of it, how much of that do you see as being the real threat? That is the anchor point to the kingdom of generations. It is the synthetic chemical molecule, which by my reckoning is by design. And I say that this is a very deep and diabolical agenda to infest and infiltrate the minds of younger generations through synthetic molecules. Just speak momentarily to that, Olivia.
Sure. First, to clear something up, when I say I've done everything on the playa, I meant in terms of operating on the playa. I run a camp. I have 2 R cars. I do like a minimum of 20 installations on the playa. So I meant from an operations point of view, not substances. Of course, I dabble in substances, but not. It's limited in that. But substances open portals. If you don't open a portal, they can't get in. So this is the number one way that they get in. And you know, there being such a we're all connected there. When you have this container, we all start vibrate, we all start getting on the same frequency, and it's so easy to affect that. But substances definitely open the portals, and that's how they get in. And in terms of synthetic and non-synthetic, I don't have enough experience to know the the difference, but if they're going to latch on and if they're going to get in, this is
maybe Robert, can you speak momentarily to that distinction between the synthetic and the organic?
Okay, I have to say first that one of the problems I have with podcasts is that they're in like this situation, there are so many things to go into that really take a lot of patience and a long time to discuss and understand, you know. And I really have 40 years studying not only the substances, synthetic and natural, through working with people, through the literature, my own experience. There's so much material here. So I'm going to just see if I can condense this a little bit. You know, I want to say that, you know, just last night, I'm writing a screenplay about Timothy Leary, who was someone I knew very well and I'd already published a book about. And I came to the part in his Harvard days when first they began their project using psilocybin and mescaline, natural products, synthesized versions of natural products. But then somebody came in, Aldous Huxley's associate, Michael Hollingshead, came in and brought LSD in. And Tim's first LSD experience was so debilitating and made him crazy that they warned everybody to stay away from this. And so this was something I was wanting to bring out. Paul, I noticed you had a little, you looked askance because Tim's life was very complicated. Okay. So let's say that yes, I'm generally agreeing that there is a very big difference between these synthetic and natural, but it's also true, I have to say, that there are sometimes the synthetic chemicals can also work to have a very profound insight into these dimensions that we're talking, these healing dimensions.
Yeah.
And let me see, I lost my train here for a second. That, you know, when you're talking about heroin, for example, I had heroin one time, and the man I was working with, the teacher, made me promise that I would never ask for it, I would never take it again. And I had an experience with heroin that was one of the most important experiences of my life, where it gave me like a 45-minute experience of life without pain, a oneness experience, a profound mystical experience. And I will never go for it again. But I just wanted to put that out there. I also wanted to raise this question, maybe in clarification about this concept of wetiko. And, you know, it's what philosophers would call the ontological question. And you guys are speaking about it as if you've used the word entity, or, you know, it's a portal for something to come in. And my own intellectual and philosophical position, trained in Buddhist philosophy, mostly in practice, that it's more and correct me if I'm wrong, if we're talking about the same thing, that I think of wetiko, as I was reading about it last night, as what the Buddhists would call avidya, which means not seeing. It means ignorance. It means not really seeing the true nature of reality. And so you get lost, you're divorced from the truth, and you become kind of afraid and get captured by delusion. but it's not so much an entity as it is more a deficiency and a psychic process that we've become infected by.
Paul, by all means.
Address that, because at least, I try to always say a seeming entity. And I make a really important distinction. We subjectively experience it as if it's an entity. That doesn't mean that it's an actual independent, objectively existing entity. That's an important distinction.
Very good.
Yeah, I think we need to be clear about this. It's also current in the news in my own life, because I've been watching this Tucker Carlson character, in the American media, and it's a big thing now where he just gave a big interview where he says he was attacked by demons.
Right.
And this ontological question, and when you go from say the Buddhist model of consciousness, and then go into a shamanic model of consciousness. Like you go from studying Vipassana meditation to doing ayahuasca with indigenous people. They have entities, and they kind of base their model of healing very often on an entity has come in and possessed you. And I'm inclined to think that if you think it's an entity, if you really believe and have been trained in a tradition that says they're entities, and you have to treat them as such. But if you're in a Buddhist model and it's more a process, and it's your own process and your own cognitive style and insight.
Can I just jump in, because that's an important point. I'm a long-time Tibetan Buddhist practitioner, and I've been enlisted in the shamanic initiatory process for decades, and I want to make the point that it's, instead of A or B, the two-valued logic, it's four-valued logic, A and B, even though they're contradictory. So on the one hand, we experience, we experience them as if they're an entity. If we think they're an entity, well, then they're an entity. We can't just, in Buddhism, there's the absolute level and the relative level. And the absolute is like, no, there's no entities. It's all one. It's all a dream. Yeah, absolutely. And they say you can't marginalize the relative. From the relative level, no, you have to honor them as if they're an entity. There's that as if consciousness. And you can't just get caught in the relative level and think, oh, they're real, they're really objectively real, without also remembering the absolute level. Indeed. That ultimately they have no intrinsic independent existence. Their nature is emptiness. The absolute and relative interpenetrate each other. That's the four-valued logic of Buddhism.
Very good, very good. And Anna, I'll bring you in here. You've charted Wetiko's metamorphosis from mythic demon to digital algorithm. And is this the ultimate colonization of the human imagination? Because it kind of touches on what we've just been speaking to.
Yes, well, there are a few little stories I want to weave into this that will help it to make sense from my personal experience and also from a public media perspective. So I'll start with my personal experience so you can understand how and why I'm actually hypersensitive to this, because one of the reasons that I'm known as one of the most accurate psychics in the world, their words, not mine, other people tell me that, is because I was born with abilities to see through multi-dimensional bodies. And when I was about 4, maybe 5 years old, I realized that other people didn't see what I was seeing when my father's friend came over at early in the morning, completely disheveled, and asking my dad for his help and trying to make up an excuse and telling this obnoxious lie because he had lost his keys and he was trying to get home to his wife and he had been out all night, obviously, and making up as he was telling more and more of this lie, of this distorted truth, and his body, his aura, I could see this darkish green gray cloud like a slime coming over him. And the more he lied, the more that he went into the depths of delusion and his own expression of his story, the more this cloud just took over him. And I screamed at him to get out of my house and never come back here. And my dad was like, there you go. There's my kid. This is what she sees. This is what we have to work with here. And my parents brought around many indigenous leaders and teachers and spiritual guides. We're raised in the Kriya Yoga lineage. So luckily I had a lot of help to guide my gifts. And so now fast forward, that's why people have come to me to ask for help and to get healing of, is there a thing? Is there a cloud? Is there a, call it an entity or just a disturbance in the field that we can heal? And again, reveal it to heal it. In order to heal it, we must know what's there and what to see it and what the foundation and the source is and what it wants. And most things want to be seen and loved, right? So when we acknowledge that and we acknowledge the loss of love or the root core of the wound that created the person to act out and create those lies in the first place, then that greenish slobby slime thing goes away and heals. Now, that moves into a movie. It was a Batman movie that's been plugged. It's been pulled from online. You can barely even find it anywhere. It was the one Batman that Jim Carrey played in as the Enigma. Did anyone see that one with where he was the Enigma? That had the green suit with the question marks all over it.
Mm.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, they pulled it, which is very interesting because it was such a massive blockbuster hit of a movie, and Jim Carrey's character, the Enigma, had figured out how to siphon the life force energy of everyone watching television. So it was depicting what was actually happening in media of siphoning life force energy, and we've known that media has put in subliminal messages and encoded programming and flashy light stuff to mess with your dopamine levels, and all of that has been proven. Yet in this movie, that was the best depiction of like a modern day Wetiko as a character, if you will, that I saw, where all of these television sets, as they were showing in the Batman movie, from thousands of people all around the world, and we're watching this TV, and their life force energy, like lights, were being beamed into the one spot where the Enigma was sitting, and he was just soaking up all of this energy and this brainwave energy. Paul, if you haven't seen that, I'd be curious to your.
Oh my God, I'm like dying to see it.
Yeah, I think we can find the clip and put it in here because it is so poignant and on point to what we're describing here. Yet there's another powerful movie called Mind Walk that came out in, I believe it was the early 90s, that specifically talks about the split that happened in society when we went from only being in the mindset and the belief system of natural science, and how that split into mechanical science. And that split happened in the science of biology, of physics, of mathematics, of governance, and even time. Now we have, the 13 moon calendar, and then we have the 12 moon, and 12 months, and the Gregorians. All of that also comes back to the separation. And as Paul has shown in his work, there's this very specific process in which this energetic thing articulates itself, and it has a swooning effect, this very seeming like love story, and kind of, it feels good at first, and then there's the entrapment, and then there's the delusion, and then there's a separation, and that's when all the chaos breaks loose. You don't even know what happened. You lost track, and before you know it, boom, you've been Wetiko, right? It's like, it's part of its track. It's how it operates in multiple different ways. Now, you mentioned the encapsulation of a pharmaceutical drug. Well, that is mechanical science. That's not natural science. That's not a raw mushroom. That's a ground up chemical that's been, through whatever mechanical manipulation, changed the molecules in a certain way to create the effect that it wants. It's in that stage that also I've seen pharmaceutical reports that have written in there an energetic frequency that is put in there. Just like you can put right frequency to heal the body, you can also put other frequencies.
It's all about isotope frequencies. That's indeed, you're absolutely right. It is frequency wars, alpha, omega. That is exactly.
It's embedded frequency.
Yeah, indeed. Well, thank you for raising that point, and also for driving this toward pharmacopoeia, because that's my next question here for Robert. I mean, Robert's warned of psychedelic corporatism. I think that's the direct quote. Are we now witnessing the spiritualization of capitalism, or the capitalization of spirit?
Yes, I think that's a good way to put it. My path is like a lot of Americans growing up in the 60s and recognizing these the effects of Wetiko throughout our culture, the environmental crisis, the Vietnam War, the military-industrial complex. And then these psychedelic drugs appeared that we were led to believe were going to be our religion, our reconnection with the spirit that could help pull us out of this this virus, this disease of ignorance. And and I was at first a very enthusiastic supporter of this. My first book, I was one of the people in the late 1970s and early 80s that really helped kick off what we see now as a psychedelic renaissance. I organized conferences. I published a book, a collection of books that emphasized the religious significance of psychedelics, to take it out of the medical profession. And I was a cautious and careful advocate until I kind of went a little deeper into the subject, and I found out some very disturbing things, that the drugs were originally deployed in modern America and Britain by these very most rapacious capitalists, and in the military, the CIA and the bankers and Skull and Bones and secret societies were really behind this deployment. Mm-hmm. And that they didn't actually, when you look at it more carefully, they didn't actually instigate the environmental movement or the feminist movement or the anti-war movement. They actually disrupted it. And it was really through the agency of Timothy Leary, who was, I say, a complicated fellow, but I like to say one of us, let's say. He really wanted to change the world and reconnect us. And that's why it caused a lot of chaos. And then the drugs were kind of withdrawn from the popular media until fairly recently, when they're being redeployed. This psychedelic renaissance, if you look carefully at the main voices and influencers that are behind this incredible, media advertising of these drugs, like, MDMA and these various concoctions of Alexander Shulgin and 5-MeO and these groups and this whole renaissance of people, they really trace back to a small group of people that all have these kind of government connections. And I feel like it's kind of my responsibility to speak more about this and try to teach discernment, because I do still really believe, and I know from my own personal experience and many people that I've worked with, that in the right circumstances, these drugs can open you up, can help suspend anyway this mind virus we're calling Wetiko here, and give a glimpse. What the person then does with that glimpse is a whole nother story. Right. But the drugs can work both ways. In this sense, it's like a microcosm of the history of religion. We all know that that's a very big subject, that religion has had many very positive influences on humanity. Ethical systems, meditation, concepts of the divine, and so forth. But also on the opposite end, religion is used as a mind control, as an excuse, as a way to control populations and subjugate them and make them commit atrocities. Indeed. The psychedelic story is a microcosm of this history. And I think it's very important that when we discuss this history, that we keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. And then to allude to religiosity and worship, idolatry in that sense is the ultimate harvest of the group plasma of humanity, because it pulls desire at its most refined, which is the deepest faith that people hold. Catholics and Muslims banging their heads against the ground, and it really has been a technology, the macro technology of the harvest of humanity in that sense, and then feeding the lower elemental cloud intelligence realms the Yahweh, the angry, jealous gods, which we fucking manufactured in the ethers with the abnegated and abdicated life force that we chose to direct toward a false light worship, idolatry, rather than plugging it into the immanence, which is a self-revealing, self-organizing phenomenon of our own divinity. So thank you for alluding to that. Paul, any comments to what Robert was speaking to?
Yeah, no, I was so happy that Robert was articulating that in the way he was, because it maps on also to AI. It's that whole idea that, whether it's, we were talking about religion or these plant medicines, some of which are artificial, they can potentially be of benefit, or they can take us down and kill us and colonize our mind and subjugate us to be automatons and zombies and robots. And, it's really pointing at the responsibility is in us as sovereign beings who, are responsible in creating our own experience. That's, and I think that's the edge that a lot of people just unconsciously turn away from, is that, it's all of this conversation is pointing at that we are the ones with the responsibility. We're talking about, we're creative beings. Yeah, we are literally moment by moment creating our experience of ourselves and of the world via the way we interpret it and place meaning on it. There's no one else who's doing that, but there's such a propensity to project out and blame somebody else or blame whoever,
That is such an important point that you're making right there, Paul. And this was, Timothy Leary has been on my mind. This is exactly what he wanted to shift in the culture. This I call it the locus of authority.
Right.
And that people who have become subservient to fascist societies, like a lot of people are, they project the authority onto the institutions, whether it's the religion, whether it's the government, the Führer, and that but in a democratic, free, sovereign society, that locus of authority is within ourselves. And it was actually Frank Barron, a man that's not well known in the history of psychedelics, who was Timothy's best friend. This is what he realized, that it was when he had his first mushroom experience, he thought this would be the key to unlock, to return the locus of authority to each individual that took it, that they would understand this profound mystery. And what you just said, that the reality that we perceive is a function of our consciousness and our creativity, and that we need to be conscious of.
And that's why in my work, I again and again circle back to seeing the dream like nature, because instead of outsourcing our authority, no, we are the author. We're creating our own experience. We are the dreamer of the dream, and that's an incredibly empowering.
Very good, Olivia. I want to bring you in here. You've lived within utopian collectives like Burning Man, as we mentioned earlier. Outside of that synthetic kind of hook, which can act, as we mentioned, as a catalyst, a negative catalyst. How do these creative gatherings otherwise slide from communion into psychic predation? What are the other factors in tribe, in community, that create that kind of circular enabling environment of moving into group delusion, so to speak, group shadow and all the rest of it? Just speak to that subject, because I don't think it's all to do with the chemical issues. There are other issues in the morphogenetic field. Speak to that.
Sure. I mean, I think it's very present in, the collective fields, whether it is a festival, whether it is a concert, a ceremony, like a plant medicine ceremony. Anytime that you have this collective field together, which is, becomes very porous, and anytime altered states are involved, alcohol is one of them. It's not just chemical substances. The spirits are very prevalent in alcohol, and when people get drunk, they change. Another person comes out. So if there is no awareness and energetic hygiene, let's say, we become a lot more susceptible to being affected by these energies, whether they are internal or external. It's all a matter of perception. But yeah, I mean, it's especially prevalent in these gatherings because there's so much light involved, and we're all gathering for, you know, to experience joy and pleasure and all those things.
But I mean,
So,
isn't that the issue? Isn't that the issue? It's like ostensibly people are gathering for that into a kind of 0 point space of kind of communion and neutrality and free exchange and so on and so forth. But is it really that, or are there other? And this is a serious question. I've studied Burning Man. I've got so many of my closest friends are radical burners. I was 25 years ago, meeting with burners at that time. I've seen the evolution from the outside. I've been invited to come, been invited to speak. I've not felt the pull. And so I won't go for that reason, because I have foundationally believed that Burning Man at its inception point, wittingly or unwittingly, is an aggregated force of harvesting plasma. That's how I saw it. And in the same way that I would speak about Manhattan as a goddamn fucking battery for battery hens, and humans are the chickens. The same way that cathedrals are these kind of, dielectric and paramagnetic, induction and capacitance technologies that have been hijacked by the godless church and religiosity. So that's ancient Tatari, that whole story. I mean, I lecture at great length on the subject, and I tour on the subject, speaking just about energetic harvesting as it relates to this misinformation, disinformation that our psycho-cultural, psycho-civilizational fuckery today has almost zero connection to what was going on 150 years ago on the planet. Genetically speaking, and in terms of what electric architecture, in terms of the ley lines, the real understanding of energetic harvesting going back for millennia with these archonic and Babylonian priesthood elements and forces, they've always run amok in the field. Do you feel foundationally that Burning Man was intentionalized by certain forces at the outset to be something of negative consequence to the younger generations? That's kind of a yes or no. I'm very interested in your take on that.
that is such a hard question because there is so much light there, but its inception versus the reality of it now, there's been so much change that's happened. Obviously, it's grown from 100 people to 90,000. I mean, it's hard to say that it was at its inception compromised. I think that now it is compromised because there's a lot of unintended consequences of all the alchemy out there, and it's just gotten out of control that you can't possibly. I mean, it's really hard to protect and to contain it. And I think since Larry died, things have changed and leadership has changed, and it's hard. The Burning Man, the organ itself is not your standard organization. It doesn't run on the same rules and principles as any other major company, let's say. And safety, definitely, as much as they try to protect and ensure safety, it's impossible. And that's why on the ticket, in the fine print, you sign up for this, and it is a human experiment.
Right.
And anything can happen, and you're fair game. And it's not their responsibility, it's your own. But yeah, does that answer?
Yeah, Paul, or did you want to comment to this?
Yeah. I have something to say because, to me, it's sort of like an iteration of the deeper fractal of like what's happening in the world.
Totally.
And the idea of, are there actual specific individuals who are like bad guys who are like engineering to like, enslave all of us and colonize our minds? Well, that might be possible, but in a way it's more, I'm more interested in, even if you took out those people who are in the positions of power, who are these like evil seeming people, that wouldn't make any difference because it's the deeper archetype that's informing and giving shape to what's playing out in the third dimension of space and time. And I think the same thing with Burning Man, that, yeah, maybe it was by design or engineered, or maybe this is just a deeper, higher dimensional archetypal pattern that's revealing itself through the interplay of what's happening in our dimension.
Very good. Very good. Okay.
I'd like to, can I just add something?
Yes, Robert, by all means.
I'll just add something to the Burning Man. This is fascinating, and I love your very, very challenging question, Sasha, to bring this up. I see it as I think some very good work has been done by the Tom McGowan, who showed that a lot of the 1960s music scene was actually created by military intelligence to be, drug delivery systems. I love the Grateful Dead music, a lot of their music. I got to know some of the people in the band, John Barlow in particular. And there are these connections with CIA. So McGowan's book shows that a lot of the music scene of the 60s was part of a PSYOP. And I don't totally agree with everything he says, but I think he really opens up a very important discussion. And in that discussion, even if it was a military PSYOP, there were people that caught glimpses and were transformed. And I don't know what the net effect on our society is. We can certainly see when you look at what was going on in the 60s in the music, the bigger bands, and how the popular music scene is really degenerated into much more kind of satanic and violent. Doesn't have any of that kind of human anti-war intimacy love vibe that we had in the 60s.
Yeah.
And I think the same is true with Burning Man. And that when you do this research, you do find, and I don't know if you know that or were just intuiting that there are some very suspicious connections with military intelligence and the instigators of Burning Man. And I went once, and to me, it reminded me of what Aldous Huxley was writing about in the late 1930s about the, if you remember, Brave New World, that he suggests that in the future, totalitarian societies, the elites are going to be able to control the masses by requiring them to go to these, he called them soma holidays, where they would be given psychedelic-like drugs, have random sex, not intimacy, but sex with everybody. And then they would come back to their, little tiny apartments and their jobs, and it's what Herbert Marcuse gave this wonderful name of repressive desublimation, that you get to express all these frustrated energies in these containments, in these containers, and that it would eliminate the revolutionary tension that was necessary to really transform society. So that's how I'm seeing Burning Man, and that and John Barlow, even, who was a really interesting character, who was very involved in Burning Man, who was very honest in some ways, but very sneaky in others, who admitted to me that he'd been an employee of the CIA for over 3 decades. There's a kind of famous quotation of John Barlow about Burning Man, where he says, if I was Karl Rove and I wanted to distract a bunch of people from voter registration, what better thing than Burning Man? That people take a half a year to get their thing ready, their cars ready, and they take, tons of, he uses a great word for psychedelics there, confusicants.
Great word.
Right? Confusicants. And then they're for weeks or months afterwards, people are getting together and talking about their Burning Man experience. And, and I know that some people go there and really see the light and are transformed, but for the most part, I wear this, I wear suspicion. So I want to say
Thank you. Anna, you describe ketamine as Wetiko incarnate. So what makes synthetics uniquely vulnerable to this possession as you see it?
This goes back to frequency. As we know, everything in creation is frequency at different vibrations. And so in our example that we've been mentioning about mushrooms, that psilocybin carries a very harmonic frequency for a very specific type of journey and healing, and has been known in microdoses to help restore the nervous system and spinal cord. And the ketamine and the frequency that has been embedded in ketamine while it's being mechanically processed is also a very specific encoded frequency. And so that's the difference of is what spirit, as Olivia said, are you choosing here, right? And this is a sovereign choice. You are, making the decision to go on that journey. And the times that I've had now over at least 30 people in the last 5 years come to me for healing because of either their spouse or their partner was overtaken by this ketamine beingness, or an entity possessed them, or whatever it was, or they themselves were suicidal and needed severe help and healing to get back to their sovereign centeredness and realize that they themselves were at the core of this delusion in the first place, and thinking that something outside of them would make them closer to God or closer to the light. And this goes back to spiritual bypassing, where Swami Sri Yukteswar said in The Holy Science, a book from the Kriya Yoga lineage, that we should only consider going into plant medicine experiences once we've learned through meditation how to tap into our own DMT first. Then we can go into other ways of cultivating the DMT with plant medicine relationships. And once you have that sovereignty of your own spirit, and you have that, and you know what that is, and then you can explore deeper and further. But anything before that is what he determined as spiritual bypassing. So now that we have that rampant is what I feel is the big
and that's where the great lie becomes, incarnate in each of us, and we take the left fork in the road. Robert, from your vantage, can synthetic psychedelics? I know we've danced around the subject in the last hour. But to really land this for the audience, from your vantage, can synthetic psychedelics ever hold the same moral or spiritual gravitas as organic sacraments?
I'm going to say very cautiously yes, and I also want to add to that the organic sacraments can also be used as weapons. And that it really is, I like to put the responsibility on the individual and the context that they're being used in and who is administering them. And I really dig what you're saying about ketamine. And my own experience, again, I was very, I knew John Lilly pretty well. I was involved in the Esalen scene, and John Lilly would, at the time I actually had a MDMA laboratory, and I was producing it in very small amounts to therapists and healers and responsible people before it was illegal. And I used to get into this organic synthesis, synthetic conversation, and I saw MDMA do really marvelous things for people. But then almost immediately it became popular and used in a different context. There was a profit motive associated with it. It was taken over by the Israeli Mossad and global commerce and the rave scene and the vibe. The whole field changed. And I can say the same thing to a lesser extent about ketamine. I just saw what it did to people, and it was horrible. Like, if you ever hung out with John Lilly, like, you wouldn't want to be like him, I mean, if you'd read his books or, read the media or the psychedelic hype, you maybe thought he was a cool guy, but he was very charming aspects, but he didn't want to be like that. But then I also want to say, I don't know why I want to say this, but a couple of 3 years ago, I was in a very depressed place, and a really magical person, beautiful woman and her partner approached me and offered me ketamine. And I said, okay, and spent a weekend with them on ketamine. And maybe because of my background and my, groundedness, it was really incredibly fascinating and instructive about history. And so I really don't think it's the substance. I think it's the individual. Anna, I'd be very interested in hearing more what you're saying about the frequency and the encoding, because ketamine is a creature of these Park Davis or something. These pharmaceutical companies that have been, they trace back into secret societies in the Third Reich and lots of really nasty.
They go back to John Dee in the basement of Queen Elizabeth I. Trust me, I've researched this way back.
And so I'm interested in that. And but again, my emphasis is always on personal responsibility and context. And just for myself generally, I stay away from all these substances now, pretty much.
Very good. Very good. Olivia, I see you dropped off again. Whilst I've got you, you speak of energetic hygiene. What are your personal protocols for maintaining sovereignty amid the intensity of these kind of backdrops like Burning Man? And how can artists and creators avoid becoming conduits for the very forces that you're seeking to expose?
First of all, there's no protection. But first of all, awareness that this is a risk, and that there's when you open these portals and when you're in these collective environments, you are subject to it. And if you're going to take a substance or alcohol, before taking it, say a prayer and ask for protection. I mean, your connection to yourself and to your spirit guides and to divinity, you don't ask, you don't get. If you don't ask for protection when you're taking it, you're left, without a coat in the cold. And I can say that has definitely helped me. And in a place like Burning Man, it is important to every day and every night clear yourself and clean yourself. I mean, that can be your own little ritual, saying a prayer. Prayer is very, very powerful. And then, clearing yourself with sage and Palo Santo, just like clearing the energy, and just, meditating for a second and saying these mantras. In my experience and in my opinion, they do work. Before I go into a large place like Burning Man, I always get a clearing from one of my healers, and then after, because whether you like it or not, as somebody especially like me, I'm a magnet because I'm talking with so many people, because I'm a person of influence, and there's a lot of exchange of energy. I can't just stay hidden. So clearings are important. Awareness and intention. If you're going to take substances, take it with intention.
Very good. Very good. That's very helpful. So healing and collective alchemy, as we move toward the end of this Lazarus panel, transformation from infection to illumination. And Paul, in outlining your 4-stage map, which is denial, recognition, integration, transmission, as a practical guide for humanity, what does your undreaming look like in practice, moment to moment?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because we were talking about how do you protect from these negative forces. And, from my point of view, there is a way of protecting yourself, and that is to be really intimately familiar with your nature. And even in Tibetan, the word meditation, it literally translates as becoming familiar. So to the extent that you actually become familiar with your nature, but one of the things you realize is that we have this genius in us, and it's a genius for fooling ourselves. And you have to integrate that into the equation, that we can very easily conjure up this black magic on ourselves where we trick ourselves out of our right mind. That being said, that's pointing to the incredible, profound importance of becoming familiar with our nature, both in our light and our dark aspects, and to be really open to self-reflection, that this universe, being a dream, is not separate from us. It's an oracle, and it's reflecting back to us, our own mind, at each and every moment. And when you begin to tap into that, then it just unlocks the other part of our genius, which is our voice, our creative voice of expression, of expressing ourselves in our own one-of-a-kind way. And to be actually embodying that and to model that, that's contagious. You know, that actually affects the field and affects other people. And, you know, and that's the idea for me of real community, of the real Sangha of Buddhism or the mystical body of Christ. When you hang out with other people who are really authentically doing their inner work, that, you know, really propagates itself through the field in a way that can, you know, really be helpful for everyone.
Beautiful, beautiful. So Anna, how does true reciprocity within plant ceremony repair the ruptures that Wetiko creates? Meaning to say, can community itself become the new medicine? Just riff on that in your closing statements.
Ooh, thank you for that, Sasha. Yes, absolutely. Well, that brings us back to the original principles of our relations with nature. I just posted an article about bringing Mother Nature into the boardroom. There's opportunity for us every single moment, even in our awareness of our breath and awareness of our environment. The more that we can really focus on the natural science that is our own biology, the more that we can honor the sacred practices of really restoring our own sovereignty and our own centeredness, as both Paul and Robert and even Olivia we've all been talking about, is really staying in that knowingness that we came here as creators. And any time that we feel that imposed energy or something pulling us from our center, then it's time to check in and really, really bring yourself back. Because whether it be an energy of someone else's assumption or whatever story about you that pulls you off track, or a substance that pulls you out of your energy, both cases mean the same thing. It's coming back to your centeredness so that you can really be in your own self-leadership and have some sovereign discernment. And in that's where you really cultivate other like-minded people that also want that same harmonious relationship with the earth and with ourselves. And that's the ultimate goal. That's why you're creating community. That's why I'm helping to build communities around the world. And that's what we came here for. So ultimately, this delusion will be healing in itself to bring us back to the centeredness of what we truly want, which is happiness and love. So
very good. Like attracts like. It's all about frequency.
Absolutely. And we have a little handbook gift if we wanted to mention that.
Carry on.
As I made a little handbook that's based off of Paul's work and other of my research over the decades, that is about awareness, activism, and what you can do to really actualize yourself in that sovereign authority. And also, if you feel any imposed of Wetiko type energy that we've been talking about, then there's a way of self-healing in that guidebook as well.
Very good. Thank you. Producer Chrissy can pass that on to our networks. Thank you. Robert, your closing transmission.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to take part in this panel, this my new Sangha. You've said a lot of things that really resonate deeply with me. And I've traveled on this path for a long time and taken part in a lot of different traditions. And in these years, I've really returned to the very basic teachings of the Buddha in the in Theravada Buddhist teachings, which is very simply the Four Noble Truths. And the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path: right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right understanding, and so on. And to really understand what these mean, because what it's about is becoming a human being. That's my task here, is to become a human being. After spending a few decades of ecstatic adventures and with ayahuasca and sacred plant drugs, I was studying extraterrestrial and exopolitics and really looking out there. And I'm very aware that there are all these other dimensions, but it took a long time to be blessed with this human birth and these particular gifts of my own human life, and that I want to really be a human being. And that's what I encourage a lot of people that come to me and ask questions about substances. Like, in these traditions that really seem to work, this pursuit of vision, that's at the end of the Eightfold Path. First, you have to have ethics and livelihood and conduct and speech and all these things. And if you're seeking a vision, your mind is a little imbalanced. And I encourage people to look more at their humanity, their relationship. You've already said the three jewels, the truth, the Sangha, and our spiritual friends, and our right action here now. That's my general strategy.
Beautiful. Thank you. Olivia, your closing thoughts, comments.
I mean, I think that the most important thing we can do here is to bring awareness around it. Awareness is, to me, the most important thing. And the more you know, the more power you have in making decisions, and integrating experiences and other people's experiences and the different viewpoints that you guys have all shared. And I think it's really interesting to take the various sides that have been discussed here and integrate that. I think it's very valuable. I know that a lot of people are silently struggling with Wetiko and not knowing what it is, or thinking that it's a mental illness, or thinking it's a chemical imbalance or whatever, because it doesn't have a name in our common lives. Let's say Wetiko is very much a concept from, I don't know, ancient cultures or different cultures. So I think, bringing awareness to this and bringing clarity and language to support this phenomenon is a very valuable tool that we can all benefit from. And thank you so much for bringing this to the light and bringing this to the masses and to your community.
Well, thank you, Olivia. Your audio is definitely broken up quite badly there. I'm hoping the audience can hear that last piece. But I was mind mapping it, and thank you very much indeed, and also for holding the light that you do. Paul, as you are and were the starting gun for this conversation, this panel on the Lazarus Symposium, last words go to you. Well, I say last words. I'll be having a closing monologue.
Right. No, I appreciate that. And, I'm just so happy that the whole idea of Wetiko is getting out into the world, because it's been in every spiritual tradition throughout history, and so many visionary, creative people have been pointing at it in their different ways. And, it's an idea whose time has come. It's a magical idea. The one thing that the greatest tyrants in history were most afraid of was an idea whose time has come, and that's Wetiko. In the sense that all of a sudden now we found the name for something that can allow us to get a handle on it and to really tap into it and extract its gift. Because, it's a quantum phenomena. It's not just like, oh, this evil, satanic devil thing. No, encoded within it, it's the greatest catalyst for human evolution that we've ever known. And so, that's why I'm just really so ecstatic that more and more people are getting switched onto it. Yeah, so I just really want to thank you so much for today.
Thank you, Paul. Well, friends, he said, turning to the audience, we have journeyed here through the eon put it this way, through the glittering labyrinth where the living forget that they are actually alive. And Wetiko is not a monster to be slain, but a mirror to be recognized, remembering, as we must, that the devil always serves God's design in that sense. And it is the spell of imitation, the synthetic echo of a forgotten song. The distinction between the synthetic and the organic is the dividing line between death and resurrection. The synthetic imitates the pattern, but not the principle. It copies life without animating breath. And to worship imitation is to embalm the spirit. To honor the living law is to resurrect. Every empire of control, and Christ knows we're coming to the end of the most heinous one in recorded history. Every algorithm of dominion, every chemical promise of bliss are the avatars of the chemical demon. They seduce us with the shortcuts to the divine, yet each shortcut subtracts a little more of our soul and diminishes us ever further in our divine hands. So the antidote then becomes breathtakingly simple, does it not? Awareness, gratitude, coherence. the withdrawal of belief from the lifeless, reinventing it in the living. Reinvesting it in the living, and reinventing it in the living, in point of fact. Trust the heart's intelligence above all instruments of artifice, for divinity was never distant. It is the immanent spark animating every seed, every tear, every truthful creation. So may this remembrance become our collective medicine. And the age of Wetiko ends when we refuse to feed it, when we choose consciousness over chemistry, communion over consumption, and creation over control. I thank deeply from this white African heart my extraordinary guests, Dr. Paul Levy and a Naturalista, Robert Forte and Olivia Steele, and each of you who joined us for this exploration between shadow and light. Stay lucid, stay sovereign, and remember, the living light is the only technology that cannot be hacked.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you, friends, very much indeed. So grateful to you all. Wonderful conversation. And I have a rather suspect there's going to be another one.
Yeah, totally. Wow. Really, thank you so much, everyone. That was great.
Thank you all. Thank you all.
Bye.
Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.